Head konverentsist osavõtjad.
Dear participants, I would like to say a few words on the topic. Without human rights, there is also no security. But let me get to this topic through a couple of twists and turns. A week ago, we started the Estonian year of the Estonian book. So a happy year of the book for all of us. The program of this year's conference also takes a book as a guide and brings a bit of gloom to us with the George Orwell's novel of 1984. It's a hypothetical journey into a situation where war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is power. This year, half a century has passed since the conclusions of the Helsinki Agreements. Let us recall, in 1975, the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe took place, where the Western and Eastern powers and the Third World agreed on the principles of security and international relations. As we know, these agreements also included an obligation to respect human rights. After long disputes, this position was that without the guarantee of human rights, there is also no international security. But now let us also consider what kind of threat Estonians saw at the time. It was feared that the great powers would conclude an agreement that would recognize the right of the Soviet Union to the occupied territories, including Estonia. It was in the interest of the Soviet Union to argue that if its factual borders were not recognized, then there'll be no security. We hear something similar from Russia today. It is a pretentious notion of security in order to perpetuate its power in the occupied territories. However, I'm sure that justice and security cannot be separated, at least not in the long run. But there's another reason to remember the 1975 agreements. Documents establishing human rights were known to have been already established by that time. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights were adopted in 1966, and so were many others. The Soviet Union had also signed these documents. In reality, however, it did not reflect in reality because signature was just that, a signature on paper. Coming to the theme of this year's annual conference on human rights, one might ask, what is more dystopian? Is it when the state honestly says that human rights do not apply to them? Or when there is an impression created that yes, indeed, there are these human rights, but in reality, they cannot be applied? In the latter case, maybe it's actually worse because violation of human rights then becomes hidden. Post-1975, pressure groups were emerging, demanding that the Soviet Union would fulfill its own commitments. There were also courageous people in Estonia who protested against the violation of Helsinki agreements and therefore fell under repression and also were imprisoned. The fight for human rights was part of our fight for freedom. It'll be naive to think that now, as we are independent, this fight is no longer necessary. Estonia is a democratic country that takes its responsibilities seriously. But goodwill is not always enough. We need people like you who observe things and issue warnings. The problem of human rights and security has not disappeared. Often it is seen that at one hand of the scales of human rights, and on the other hand we have security. So when the international situation becomes difficult, then we have to surrender on some of the security and we have to limit rights and freedoms. However, I would say that today this old truth still applies. There is no security without respect for human rights. When we force human rights to retreat, then actually also security retreats. We must also refrain from the pretext approach to security. There is also the danger of starting to create restrictions just to feel more secure, or even just thinking that maybe now we can feel more secure because of it. For each limitation, we need to ask what exactly it achieves and what assures us that something will actually be achieved. Nowadays, the protection of human rights may even mean, first and foremost, careful reflection and avoidance of mistakes. And also it means that we need to have public control over power. There can be no wise people without freedom. Without wise people, there is no good governance. The more difficult the situation in the world is, less we can allow ourselves not to be wise. But dear participants, I hope we'll have good discussions and thank you for listening.